if you haven't been having as much fun with League or have even quit it altogether because you don't enjoy the current state that League of Legends is in, then watch this entire video and by the end of it, you'll know what to do and how to fix it. Before we start, I just want to give you guys a little bit of backstory. I have not enjoyed playing League of Legends in the last 2 years. The truth is that the last time I actually felt like I was really in love with the game and really enjoying it was when I was in Germany and I had met Laura for the first time. And the reason why is because that was the patch before Riot introduced the thing that most people thought would save the game, but actually ended up harming it. The durability patch. You see, back in the days of Mythics, everybody was getting one shot instantly. You had items like Drakthar or even Divine Sunder that were doing upwards of 10 to 20,000 damage every single game. It didn't matter what class of champions you were, you would have an overload of damage. ADCs had Kraken Slayer, mages had Night Harvester. Assassins had Drakthar, they had Prowler's Claw initially and then also Eclipse. Bruisers had Divine Sunder. And even tanks had items like Sunfire that would do insane damage, and if that wasn't enough, they also had Everfrost that would amplify their team's entire damage output. So long story short, everything was just doing too much. People felt like they died in literally 1 second, and the truth is that they did. And after months and months of complaining about it, Riot decided to do something that every player thought was the best change ever. They introduced the durability patch. Now, what was the durability patch? Essentially, it was the patch that made everybody tankier. Back in the day, you would get to level 16 and you would see ADCs that would sometimes have health bars below 2000 HP. A level 16 Jhin might have 2000 HP and 50 armor, which made him what? Squishy. So essentially, squishy classes of champions would get to the point where they would be squishy for the entire duration of the game. Their health wouldn't be high, their armor and MR values wouldn't be high, and they would be very easy to kill. But what the durability patch aimed to do was it aimed to level the playing field. Riot essentially wanted to make it so that even these squishy champions could feel like they could still impact the game. And so they increased their armor, they increased their armor growth, and they increased the health values of almost every single champion in the game, squishies included, in one single patch. And what this did is it made the game feel relatively balanced again for a little while. Because even though we had an overload of damage, we now also had an overload of tankiness. So it made things feel more evened out with the X factor of added damage that Mythics brought into the game. But the problem was that a lot of people started to realize that once Riot started removing Mythics and nerfing all the items, that even though items are now in probably the weakest state they've ever been, that champion tankiness has never left. And if you don't know what I mean, I want you to play a fun little game. I challenge you to play the fun game called Who's the Squishy? Chances are you're gonna fail miserably. By the time we get to late game nowadays, crit ADCs have a 500 health shield from Bloodthirster before the fight begins. Ability caster ADCs get Training Force and or Shojin, so they have another bonus 700 health from items alone. And everybody's walking around with a base of 100 armor. Ezreal is a champ that's meant to be an ADC, but when you look at him late game, he's 3500 health with 100 armor. 2 seasons ago, even Renekton wouldn't have those stats. So the problem nowadays is that people feel like there's just way too much tankiness in the game, and especially considering the fact that tenacity has gotten consistently removed and or nerfed over the last few years, CC is also out of control. So that's led to one of the most stale metas that's ever been produced in League history, where we now have the tank CC meta. Every single game, everybody's tanky, and the question of who wins falls not on who plays better, but just who gets their chain CC off first. So in short, it's impossible to actually enjoy the game nowadays, right? Wrong. For 2 years, I fell into this trap. And what I want to do with this video is I want to get you out of it. I'm sure a lot of you have recently been seeing that I've been absolutely dominating with Assassin Hecarim. For those that haven't, look at this. Over the course of the last 8 days, I've managed to climb an account from Emerald to Grandmaster 600 LP, only 200 LP away from Challenger, and I'm going Assassin Hecarim almost every single game. As you can see, it doesn't matter if I'm playing against Challenger players, Diamond players, famous streamers, complete nobodies, or anything. I am stomping every single game. And now your question must be, but Dantes, if everyone is so tanky, then how are you able to make Assassin Hecarim work in this meta? And the answer is very simple. Because I'm the best Hecarim world. Anyways, listen, I'll give you guys the real answer. Are you ready? So, for this, I'm going to have to stand up for a second and walk around, so bear with me. To properly illustrate the concept of tankiness nowadays, we're going to have to do something very simple, and it's revolving around mathematics. So everybody knows that the way that resistances works is in an exponential function, correct? For those that don't know what this means, it means that when you have very little amounts of armor and you end up purchasing armor, it has a much higher impact than when you buy more armor once you already have a lot of armor. Everyone knows that over a year ago now, I innovated the Eclipse Cleaver Zeke's build. And essentially what this build aimed to do, it aimed to make Hecarim function as a frontliner in a meta in which I thought he had to be a frontliner. So, we essentially turned Hecarim into this frontline bruiser that was meant to tank for his team. But the truth is that anybody that's a real Hecarim one-trick knows that this is not the fun way of playing Hecarim. The fun way of playing Hecarim is when you're able to ult on a carry, one-shot them, nuke them out of orbit, and then be able to solo carry the game for your team just by being able to find the right flank angles. This was something that peaked during the Duskblade of Drakthar Hecarim times, but it's also something that we also saw throughout every iteration of every fun Hecarim meta. You see, when Divine Sun or Serax Hecarim was a thing, your goal was also to ult onto the enemy carries. When Chemtank Hecarim was a thing, it was the same as well. Your goal as Hecarim has always been ulting on the carries and having enough damage through your items to be able to kill them. But the truth is that with Eclipse Cleaver Zeke's, you do not have this opportunity unlocked unless you're literally 30 kills up. And the question is why? I'll explain. So Hecarim is a diver. What this essentially means is that he wants to get onto an enemy backline and then be able to use his abilities instantly and try to one-shot the enemies. He is not meant to necessarily be a DPS, he's meant to be someone that gets on people, has a huge fear, disrupts them, and then kills them while everyone's running around because of the ult CC. But the truth is that with Eclipse Cleaver Zeke's, you are unable to perform this function. And the reason why is simple. Eclipse's only value is in giving you a shield, and Cleaver's value only peaks after you've hit the enemy with 5 separate physical damage abilities. So what this means is your first 2 items, Eclipse and Cleaver, which are normally the only 2 damage items you build before Zeke's, only serve the function of working in extended fights and keeping you alive. Which, as we just established throughout every single fun Hecarim meta, isn't what you actually want to do. And the worst part about it is the fact that in a meta where everyone is already super durable, how are you able to compete with ADCs having barrier, tank supports having locket, enchanter supports being able to shield for 500 to 600 when you're trying to kill the enemy squishies? The truth is that you just can't. The reason why Bruiser Hecarim doesn't feel fun at all is because you're essentially playing a wet noodle stick fight with people that just outclass you. And that's the reason why recently, after having so much trouble and so much trying time what the proper route is, I decided to default back to lethality. So this is a thought process that I want everybody to realize applies to every single AD caster bruiser in the entire game. Anybody that in the past has been able to work with lethality builds can also use everything I'm saying right now for their own champions, not just Hecarim. How is armor penetration calculated? Well, percent armor penetration is calculated first, and then lethality is added on top. So what this essentially means is that when you have a 3-item spike of Yumu's, Shojin, and Cyrilda's, when you look at an enemy carry that has 100 armor, they're instantly getting 30% of that reduced. So what does this mean? It means that 100 armor goes down to 70. This is the same amount of armor penetration that would be occurring if you go for a standard Bruiser Hecarim build. The only difference being that Serylda's allows you to unlock it instantly, whereas Cleaver needs to be wrapped up and stacked up. Now, what does this actually mean though? This means that if an enemy carry has 100 armor, they're reducing 50% of the incoming damage. But by reducing their armor by 30%, they are now reducing damage by 41%. So essentially, a Serylda's or a fully stacked Cleaver is only actually giving you a 9% damage augmentation. This is hilariously low. If you're doing 1000 raw damage, it means that now, instead of reducing 500, the enemy ADC is only reducing 410. But let's say we add a lethality item on top of it, like Yumu's. The armor value now goes from 70 to around 50, which means that instead of reducing 41%, they're only reducing 33% now, which literally doubles the amount of damage that you're doing comparatively. And assume that you now throw a Serpents on top of it, then the percent damage reduction goes from around 33 to 25. So what's happening here? It was really after looking at this chart that I came to realize something super important. It's not that the durability patch made it so now enchanters and ADCs and all of these champions are unkillable. The only thing that it did is it delays your damage spike compared to what you used to get by maybe one lethality item. So if back in the day, I used to be able to do 500 damage a Q with Duskblade Manmune Serylda's, nowadays to be doing 500 damage a Q, I would probably need Yumu, Shojin, Serylda's, and Serpents. But the damage potential is still there, and that's the thing I want people to realize. Doing damage is not dead. I had a game the other day where at 5 items, I was queuing an enemy Janna for 900. These are damage numbers that I have not seen in literally the last 2 years. And I already know what the argument's going to be. The argument's going to be, but Dantes, you already said that CC is out of control too. So how are you supposed to play an assassin setup when you're getting CC'd constantly? And that's why I'm going to make you realize that this is something that isn't new to League. It's always been in the game. After looking back on my first Korea trip, I actually noticed that when I went to Korea, in about 40% of my games, I was doing the Radiant Virtue Manamune build. When you're playing a champion that can be an assassin, you need to have some kind of tanky variation. And that's why a tanky variation that I also innovated for Hecarim is a Trinity Force setup, where you go Trinity Force, Deadman's Plate, Merc Treads into Serylda's with Jack of all trades, and you're able to feel like you can solo carry games even with a Conqueror setup. Now you might be asking, with this setup, why are you going Magical Footwear and Jack of all trades? The truth is simple. The movement speed that you're losing from missing out on Celerity, you're gaining back from the Magical Footwear Augmented Boots. And once you get the 4% movement speed increase from Deadman's, Celerity becomes obsolete anyways. So by being able to get free boots since you're not going Ionian Rush anyways, and getting the Jack of all trades to give you an added 25 adaptive force and 10 ability haste, you can actually turn yourself into a massive threat. But see, the thing is that I can sit here and I can try arguing for hours about why I'm theoretically correct. I can bring you guys examples, I can bring you guys patches, and I can do all this stuff. But instead what I'll do is I'll let my work speak for me. You see, I got in a Twitter argument the other day with this guy that argued that Yumu's Hecarim was super bad because on a random website, he saw that it was Hecarim's lowest win probability item. I argued with him about theory for 1 to 2 hours, in which he just ended up saying that I was rage baiting and didn't accept my opinion. But nowadays, when we look at the same exact website that he was using, what do we see? Yumu's Ghostblade, with the almost second highest pick rate out of all Hecarim builds, is Hecarim's second highest win rate probability item, with the first being Trinity Force, another build that I've been doing. And when you look at other websites like u.gg, for example, you'll see that from Emerald Plus, you'll see that Yumu's is already taking over the leaderboards, even though people are just starting to get used to the feeling of Assassin Hecarim being back. And when we look a little further back, we can see that Axiomark Hecarim, which is another build that I was pushing everyone to be going for, was actually the highest win rate Hecarim build for 3 patches in a row, Emerald Plus, ever since I invented it. So now you're probably asking yourself, why is this video called The Right Side of History? It's very simple. It's because I want you to be on it. In life, I don't know much. I never finished college, I never got a degree. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. But if there's one thing I dedicated my life towards doing and perfecting, it's the mastery of this champion that I've come to love so much. And I'm gonna be honest, with all of the accomplishments that I've garnered over the years, whether it be Challenger in 4 different regions as a Hecarim OTP, Challenger for the last 5 years, every single split, every single season, or even the fact that I've innovated almost every single Hecarim meta that you guys have come to know and love, I feel like that should be enough, right? So the only thing that I wanted to do here was bring you guys back to a place where for everyone that loves Hecarim, you start to love him again. I've been feeling passion and desire to play unlike anything I felt in literal months and years with this game. And I just want you guys to relive that feeling that you used to get from it as well. The TLDR is if you want to do damage, you gotta build damage. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I'll see you all for the next ones where we're dominating Challenger as Assassin Hecarim. Peace.